I come to you today from the intersection of art and science. Our art informs our science informs our art, and sometimes the wild imaginings of artists and scientists do indeed become science fact and technological realities. Everyone from science fiction writers to billionaire tech gurus to animated sitcoms have been telling us what tomorrow holds, and their track records have been surprisingly on the money. Here are some predictions that nobody actually expected to come true, and yet that's exactly what happened. Of all the future predictions made in Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey, there's one that the movie got entirely right. It's not the lunar colonies, at least not yet, but the tablet used by astronauts that looks almost identical to today's iPads. As author Arthur C. Clarke described it in the 1968 novel of the same name, these devices were called musepads and could be plugged into the ship's information circuit to scan the latest reports from Earth. It was a postage stamp-sized rectangle, then it could expand until it neatly filled the screen. When an astronaut had finished, he would just flash back to complete the page and select a new subject for detailed examination. Unfortunately, neither Kubrick nor Clarke lived to see the iPad get released in 2010. In the early 20th century, telephones were still relatively new, but it was audacious for Nikola Tesla to suggest that we would be walking around with phones in our pockets. He explained to the New York Times it will soon be possible to transmit wireless messages all over the world so simply that any individual can carry and operate his own apparatus. Now, to be fair, a lot of fiction imagined what it might be like if human beings were capable of flying to the moon. But From Earth to the Moon, an 1865 novel by author Jules Verne, got closer than most with all the details. I mean, it was a little bit silly. A giant cannon fired a manned projectile into space, but he wrote about weightlessness that astronauts experienced. I mean, something an author in the mid-19th century, how would he know that? From Earth to the Moon described 3 Americans' mission to launch a spacecraft and land on the moon. I mean, parts of the novel were similar to the first real moon landing, which occurred 104 years later. NASA's command module was named Columbia, and Verne's fictional spacecraft was named the Columbiad. NASA astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin succeeded in walking on the lunar surface in 1969, while Michael Collins remained in the spacecraft. The 3 men in Verne's novel, however, never stepped foot on the moon. NASA has acknowledged other similarities between Apollo 11 and Verne's novel. For example, the space agency said the Columbiad's shape and size closely resembled the Apollo spacecraft. The novel also claimed a telescope would be able to see the Columbiad mission's progress. When an explosion caused a malfunction during the Apollo 13 mission in 1970, a telescope at Johnson Space Center was able to see the accident, which took place more than 200,000 miles away. Weird prediction, inspired prophecy, or the power of wild mind to create the future? The iconic communicator device on Star Trek, which was first shown in 1966, looked a lot like a flip phone. Now, the engineers were already developing technology in the 1960s, but it took Motorola until 1973 to debut the first mobile phone. Now, Motorola cell phones would hit the market in 1983, but they were super large and heavy and expensive. But Motorola continued to make improvements for the next several years, and the company's first flip phone was released in 1989, very similar to the Star Trek device. Star Trek featured replicators that could 3D print food and everyday objects in a few seconds. Scientists are now using 3D printing technology to make objects out of plastic, metal, and glass, though the process is not nearly as fast. Startups like Natural Machines are working on making 3D food printers commercially available. One of the most exciting future advances in science is 3D bioprinting. That is the use of modified 3D printers which stack successive layers of material to create objects or cells to construct living tissue. Researchers already have printed skin and vertebral disc and transplanted them into animal bodies successfully, but they're still years and possibly decades away from fashioning a complex organ such as a liver, kidney, or heart for transplant using a patient's own cells as raw material. One day, a transplant surgeon could be able to order a complete organ with certain specs, just as he might pick out a hard drive or all the bells and whistles on a new car. The biggest challenge, researchers say, is not in making the organ itself, but duplicating the complicated internal network of blood vessels that keeps a part nourished and oxygenated. If you think 3D bioprinting is a weird idea, you'll probably be totally dumbfounded by another, even more innovative concept: the notion of reproducing an object or creating a new one outright by putting it together molecule by molecule. Molecular manufacturing, as it's known, could revolutionize our entire civilization by enabling us to build machines or even buildings quickly and cheaply according to precise specifications and with virtually no defects. The physics principles behind molecular manufacturing are mind-blowingly complex, but in greatly oversimplified words, it basically would involve creating a workforce of scores of tiny little robots called assemblers who would guide chemical reactions and put together a few atoms at a time to create molecules, which in turn would become the building blocks of the object and will actually be able to control the structure of matter. Imagine that. And again, these are all things that people are dreaming about, innovating, and believing will actually work in our near future. The New York-based nonprofit says it has even developed carbon nanotube membranes that could separate and put together individual molecules. Again, whatever you are thinking or dreaming about today might be amazing science tomorrow. Imagine having one of these devices with you on Mars. You could print food, fuels, building materials, and medicines from the atmosphere and soil or recycled parts without having to transport them from Earth. So again, I ask you, weird predictions inspired prophecy, or are they using their own very amazing supercomputer, their brain, to create the future? The Jetsons in 1962 all had a watch that could stream video in color. Now, again, it's very similar to the design we see today. Elroy used his watch to watch the Flintstones and communicate with his family. Now, today's smart watches, such as the Apple Watch, don't have the same video capability, but people use the device to make phone calls, look at photos, and more. And the Jetsons also show very accurately drones and holograms, which, again, are becoming even more ubiquitous. There's not much in Ray Bradbury's 1953 Fahrenheit 451 that we do want to come true. But there's one detail that we're glad became a reality. In the society of Bradbury's book, they're obsessed with entertainment and need to be constantly distracted by mass media. Many of them do so with little seashells filling their ears with an electronic ocean of sound, of music and talk coming in on the shore of unsleeping minds. Now, who can think of what that might be in the 21st century? You guessed it, earpods. Again, something as simple as that. Someone wrote about it, wrote it as science fiction, and now is coming true, is true. You'll see other things like the walls of Facebook. Isaac Asimov also predicted the rise of autonomous cars by visiting a World's Fair in 1964. And he thought in 50, 60 years, there are going to be self-driving cars and trucks. He said much effort will be put into the designing of vehicles that can be set for particular destinations that will then proceed without interference by the slow reflexes of a human driver. Yep, he wrote that in 1964. Now, autonomous vehicles are already on the road, and many more will be in the coming years. The FAA is even currently designing airports so that you will have a place to park your flying car. I think we've grown accustomed that space travel is something big and expensive and powerful rockets and capable of re-entry and landing, and that costs an awful lot of money. But think about this. Wouldn't it be easier if we could just get on an elevator and ride it slowly but steadily into orbital space, as if we're going for lunch to some very expensive restaurant on the top floor of a skyscraper? Now, such a magical apparatus also would enable us to return to Earth just as easily without having to experience the rigors and risk of rapid re-entry through Earth's atmosphere. Sounds a bit kooky, doesn't it? But scientists predict, and again, these predictions, these wild leaps of fancies have and are creating the future. Many believe that a space elevator will be operational as early as 2070 and definitely by the 22nd century. By 2070, rising sea levels could leave 150 million people fleeing flooded homes. A Belgian architect and design visionary has suggested another alternative. What if instead of fleeing the rising seas, we simply build new cities that float on them? In 2008, he unveiled his design for LilyPad, a 50,000 inhabitant floating city modeled in shape after the giant water lily native to the Amazonian basin. LilyPad would be a totally self-sustaining community with aquatic gardens for growing food, desalination plant to produce drinking water, and energy generation through solar, wind, and wave power. Better yet, LilyPad would be outfitted with a titanium dioxide skin capable of absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, making just a small dent in global warming. And you all know that Al Gore didn't invent the internet. The first person to dream about the possibilities of a globally connected community might be just as surprising, however. Mark Twain imagined such a future in his 1898 short story from the London Times of 1904, where he introduced readers to something called a telelectroscope that used the phone system to create a worldwide network for sharing information. This innovation, Twain wrote, would make the daily doings of the globe visible to everybody and audibly discussable too, by witnesses separated by any number of leagues. So, the next time you use Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, remember that the guy who wrote The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn thought of it first. John Elfreth Watkins was an engineer who was pretty sure he knew where the world was heading, and he shared his thoughts with Ladies' Home Journal in 1900. Many of his predictions never came true, like he thought mosquitoes and houseflies would go extinct. Too bad that didn't. But he got something quite right with startling accuracy, like the advent of digital photography. Photographs will reproduce all of nature's colors, he wrote, and they could be transmitted from any distance. If there be a battle in China 100 years hence, snapshots of its most striking events will be published in the newspapers an hour later. Cameras around the world will be connected electrically with screens at opposite ends of circuits, thousands of miles at a span. The only thing I don't think he saw coming was our tendency to use this amazing technology to take endless selfies and pictures of our breakfast. Isaac Asimov, the legendary science fiction author and biochemistry professor, had a few thoughts also about what the world would look like 50 years in the future. Writing for the New York Times, he told readers that by 2014, gadgetry will continue to relieve mankind of tedious jobs. We can cook auto meals ready to eat within seconds and complete lunches and dinners with the food semi-prepared, stored in the freezer until ready for processing. There would also be devices capable of heating water and converting it to coffee. Well, we may not have any robot butlers yet, but at least we have the microwaves, coffee machines, and Blue Apron and Hello that Asimov promised a half century ago. Now, Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land is about alien creatures trying to fit in with human societies, and within that narrative, he creates a typical middle-class home of the future that isn't that far off from what we have today, particularly when it came to personal computers. When a computer or stereo vision tank was left unattended, Heinlein wrote it became disguised as an aquarium filled with animated guppies and tetras swimming around. Or as it's more commonly described half a century later, a screensaver. Thomas J. Watson, founder of IBM, says, there's a market in this world for about 5 computers. What? Between my husband and I and laptops and smartphones and a home computer, we have 5 just in one house. So maybe even great innovators get predictions wrong from time to time. But wouldn't you rather be at least pitching the universe with improbable ideas than binge watching the next thing Netflix suggests? More than 100 years before we learned that Mars had 2 moons, Phobos and Deimos, Jonathan Swift made an educated guess about the red planet. In his 1726 novel, Gulliver's Travels, he wrote about 2 lesser stars or satellites which revolve about Mars. And even more remarkably, he predicted their exact size and speeds of rotation. Given that no technology existed yet that would have made Mars visible, how could Swift possibly have known this? There's been a lot of wild speculation. including theories that Swift himself might have been a Martian. Sounds crazy. So, as you can see, human after human have been making groundbreaking developments in technology and space exploration for many, many years. Grace Hopper was noted for her curiosity since early childhood, and having been caught by her mother dismantling 7 alarm clocks to see how they worked, she was limited to just one after that. But after the U.S. entry into World War II, Hopper tried to enlist in the Navy, but she was rejected because she was too young and too small. But she persisted and eventually received a waiver to join the Women's Reserve of the Navy. Her perseverance was notable also because of her programming work. And she had this new idea about a programming language based entirely on English. But they said that'll never work because computers don't understand English. It took years before her idea was accepted, but she persisted, and the COBOL, Common Business Orientated Language, has gone on to become the most widely used business language to date. Among many other awards, Hopper was granted the Society of Women Engineers Achievement Award in 1964 and has earned the nickname Amazing Grace. And those were just a few of the folks whose predictions, coming to us in the form of stories, books, art, and real science, either came true and are coming true. It's amazing, isn't it? I believe that imagined future inventions fall into a couple of categories. There are inventions that turn out to be game changers, such as the telephone and the personal computer. But for each of those gadgets that transform civilization, there are probably just as many other technological visions that never actually come to pass. But there's also a third group composed of unexpected discoveries that changed the world, such as British bacteriologist Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin, the first antibiotic in the late 1920s. Those, I think, are the ones with the greatest transformational power because they can rapidly, radically affect change that we're not even prepared for. You see, the folks who dare to make bold and outrageous predictions just keep asking really good questions, wondering and dreaming about the answers. And remember this, if you ask enough questions, seek to see out of the box, over the top, crazy ideas, that kind of persistent ideation, no matter how absurd, may lead you to outcomes that never could have been achieved unless you kept relentlessly creating the future. Albert Einstein said if an idea is not absurd enough, then there is no hope for it. And computer scientist Alan Kay said, you can predict the future by creating it. So here are my predictions for your future. You're going to have your Apollo moment. You'll see the first woman and the next humans return to the moon, set up base, and start training for Mars. You'll see off-world living at the moon, and space tourism will be commonplace. Hey kids, this year for summer vacation, we're not going to Disneyland, we're going to the moon. You'll see and be the first humans on Mars, researching and figuring out a way to create a lifeboat for humanity. You'll innovate tools for exploration that will cure cancer here on Earth as you farm on Mars. You will solve food scarcity here on Earth. And my hope is you'll create a kind and gentle technology whose algorithms only allow for the truth. You'll create governments and systems that are good, equitable, and inclusive for all and not just for some. You'll find ways to partner across the globe, collaborate for humanity's sake, and find ways to have utter respect and tolerance for those who look, think, and believe differently than you. Now, I could spend time telling you that the SLS just passed another green test run, Perseverance lands on Mars in February, and in a few months, Ingenuity will have its Wright brothers moment on Mars. And this high-risk, high-reward technological experiment will either prove or disprove our hope of flying machines on other planets. But I'm less interested in telling you what is on the horizon than I am about encouraging you to keep reading, pursuing, and coming up with the most outlandish, absurd ideas for the future. And even if you doubt what you are proposing today, thinking that is a crazy idea, keep going and create even wilder and more audacious ideas for the future. Imagine that your kids will not ride the bus to school, but will be hopping in a flying car to make their way to playdates and playgrounds. You will be the ones who innovate great schools, affordable housing, easy access to culture and entertainment on the moon and on Mars. Come to the moon. The best view of Earth is here. But it goes well beyond this. You will create space infrastructures that will propel long-term human exploration to various places in our solar system. You will create communities, cities, and collaborations that will value character, integrity, and conscience above fame, fortune, and greed. You will be the torchbearers of human rights, lunar rights, Martian rights, consistently and equitably, no matter where humans are in space. You see, we are in the midst of the most sweeping transformation of humanity ever. You'll adhere to the Artemis Accords and make the space industry the vehicle for peace for our planet. You'll create the customs, compliance, laws, and justice systems for how we, as humanity, conduct ourselves off-world. You'll see supersonic flight become ubiquitous and use it to lessen the carbon footprint. You'll figure out how best to travel in space, create habitation, grow food, recycle waste, anything that we can think of needing here on Earth. You are now tasked with creating. Oh yeah, you are the architects of all the logistics and mechanisms of our future in space. Just by participating in Cities in Space, you're already creating the ideas that will help us navigate the unfamiliar seas of interstellar space. And please, find yourself a mentor. There are folks that are walking knowledge banks who have been dreaming all these things. And since you may very well be the ones to carry them to fruition, go find your mentor. Ask to learn from them and go forth and make crazy ideas happen. Most of all, I urge you to learn from how provocative words and rhetoric can lead to violence. Choose your words wisely, young people. Life and death reside in the words we use. An ideal of mutual respect, tolerance, and the power of collective action in the name of the global good is what space exploration is all about. Let's go on this journey together to do powerful good wherever in this world that good is needed. So, predict the future by creating it? You bet. When it comes to the future, you have two choices. You can sit back and think, it's not happening to me. No, and build a great big wall to keep out all the bad news. Or you can build windmills and harness the winds of change. We are on the eve of a great transition. In order for the future to occur, someone must first think it, say it, and dream it, and believe it into being. I think a shift of mind is beginning to facilitate the future, and I want to restate the prediction for 2061 that Daniel Quinn writes in The Story of B. The world will not be changed by old minds and new programs. The world will be changed by new minds and no programs. Ooh, what does that even mean? I'm not even sure exactly, but I have enough years on me to be called an old mind. So let your new mind imagine and create the future. I mean, you're already creating the ideas that are going to help us navigate the unfamiliar seas of interstellar space. You and your peers make up the largest generation of young people the world has ever known. And I look forward to the dynamism you all will bring to the space industry. I'm looking forward to you making your mark. And whether it's a city in space or a community on the moon or Mars, this future is yours to write. You will sing this song into the very hearts of stars. You will show us how to turn the dark of night into a guiding light and how to grow jasmine in an audacious place. I have great faith in you. So draw it, write it, build it, dream it, innovate, invent it. Go ahead. Predict the future by creating it. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I am super excited to introduce you to Jack and Drakka. How's it going, Jack?
Awesome. I can't wait to be on the show.
Initially, your reasoning behind starting this experiment was very personal.
Yeah, definitely. I actually became interested in pancreatic cancer because a close family friend who's actually like an uncle to me passed away from pancreatic cancer when I was 13. And upon further research, I found that 85% of all cases of pancreatic cancer are diagnosed late, when someone has less than a 2% chance of survival. And this is because we really have no current way of diagnosing the cancer in the earliest stages or having a screening technique to screen the general population for the cancer. So essentially what my work was creating a simple dipstick test to detect the cancer in the earliest stages.
Do you believe that that idea that came to you as you're rather doodling in biology class came to you via inspiration?
It was kind of just like pure luck, like being in the right place at the right time, and combined kind of with like imagination and a bit of creativity. However, I think that a lot of initial scientific ideas don't have too much science in them. They're just wild ideas that people dream up and see if they can make them become a reality.
Well, you got a lot of no's before you even got a mild yes, correct?
199 rejections of my procedure, and at this point I was really starting to doubt my procedure because I could take no from my biology teacher, I could take no from my parents, but 199 professors with like PhDs and degrees, I was getting really nervous because these people actually knew what they were talking about, and I'm like, well, if the professionals don't think it's right, then maybe I'm not onto something.
Well, you finally stuck it out for the one guy who kind of mildly said, okay, you've been persistent.
Definitely. Dr. Anirban Maitra of Johns Hopkins University, he was so awesome, and he guided me through the lab because it was my very first time in like a professional studying lab. Usually I just tinker in my basement.
Was there a sense of giving up, or there was like, no, I'm gonna try something else?
For me, it's just like science is just a lot of hard work with a bit of creativity added in. One thing that really drives my research was something my lab mentor really touched on, is that it's all about who you're impacting in science, because you always never forget who your target audience is and who you're impacting. So for me, it was 100 people die of pancreatic cancer every day. So I think whenever I'd go into the lab, how am I going to help save 100 lives today?
I wish you only the best. Thanks again, Jack. Bye-bye. Remember, inspiration can lead to innovation. Logic can take you from point A to point B, but imagination can take you everywhere. Let your mind revolve around this thought. Whatever you can think, dream, or imagine today just might be great science tomorrow. And that's the view from Janet's Planet. Today I am with an amazing science genius. Shubham Banerjee has invented something truly remarkable. Welcome, Shubham. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Tell everybody for me, if you will, what exactly you invented.
What I invented, it's a low-cost Braille printer made out of Legos. And what it does, it prints Braille. It uses a pin from Home Depot you can buy, and it's very easy to make, very simple to program, and very easy to learn.
Fantastic, because I read that it costs about $2,000 for a real Braille printer.
It starts at $2,000 and it can get up to $80,000.
How much does your Braille printer cost?
$350, which is 82% less costly than the normal Braille printer.
What exactly inspired you to make a Braille printer?
I was inspired by all these visually impaired people and how the radio access for a normal Braille printer is so it's not likely and it costs so much.
So apparently you identified a problem, which means we need a less expensive Braille printer. Talk to me how you brainstormed your plan.
It was a trial and error process. I found a model that I wanted, and then from there I modified that and made my Braille printer. In real Braille, it actually makes dents in the paper, and mine it makes holes. So then in the future I hope to actually make from the head of the real Braille printer, with that pin I can include it in my Braille printer.
Well, it sounds like you're off to a great start. Had you invented something or some things before you invented your Brago?
I mean, this is my first robotics kit, but I've tried many times.
So you said it took a long while to do this, from start to finish, when you knew you had like exactly how you wanted it. How long did it take?
It took around 4 weeks.
What really inspired you to create?
I didn't know if I could build it, I said, okay, I want to try. I wanted to help the visually impaired so badly. I didn't think it was possible, but after many trial and error process, then I finally got the result I wanted.
I mean, not only do you have a brilliant mind, you also have an amazing heart. And I want to compliment you on that, because you could have potentially sold this technology to someone for lots of money, but you didn't do that. What did you do?
I made the programming and how to build it for free. And currently it's on YouTube. You can program it and build it for free.
What do you want to share with kids your age or other kids around the world about the thrill of inventing something?
You know, first you learn from your mistakes, never give up, and it's always good to help people.
Wow. Again, I just am so super impressed and want to encourage you so very much to continue to use that great brain of yours. You've got a bright future, my friend. Let your mind revolve around this thought. Remember, whatever you can think, create, or imagine today just might be great science tomorrow. And that's the view from Janet's Planet.